I used to send $2,000 to my daughter every week so she could live well. Then I got 38 missed calls when I invited her for Christmas. I only needed to hear her voice to understand that my own flesh and blood had turned me into a stranger. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would tell. And if for 1 second you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me continue to vent. My name is Eleanor Miller. I am 68 years old, and I live in a small apartment in the Upper East Side neighborhood of New York City. From my window, I can see the hustle and bustle of Lexington Avenue, where people rush to their jobs, their appointments, their full lives. I stay here, between these four walls that smell of lavender and loneliness, waiting for a call that never comes. My routine is always the same. I wake up at 7 in the morning, make coffee in the Italian stovetop espresso maker my late husband George gave me 30 years ago, and I sit in front of the phone. I wait, always waiting. The hours pass slow as molasses, marked only by the tick-tock of the wall clock I inherited from my mother, and the distant noises of the neighbors preparing to face another day. Until 3 months ago, my day began differently. I would wake up with a smile because I knew I had a purpose: to take care of my daughter, Nicole, and my granddaughter, Jenny. Every Tuesday, religiously, I would go to the corner bank, that Chase branch where the teller already knows me by heart, and transfer $2,000 to my daughter's account. $2,000 that represented almost my entire widow's pension, plus the savings George had left after a lifetime working as an electrician. "Ms. Miller," Carla, the teller, would say, "Are you sure you want to send that much money again?" And I, with my chest swelling with pride, would reply, "It's for my family, dear, so my granddaughter can have everything she needs." Nicole always had a reason. "Mum, the washing machine broke down and we need a new one." "Mum, Jenny needs private English tutoring. It's super expensive, but it's her future." "Mum, we have to fix the car. We can't get to work without it." Every request came with that sweet voice that reminded me of the little girl who once ran around my kitchen, stealing pieces of apple pie while I cooked. But there was something in her words that no longer sounded the same, a coldness that had been settling in over the years, like those leaks that start small and end up corroding the entire structure of the house. Her "I love you, Mum" sounded automatic, mechanical, as if she were saying it while thinking about something else. My apartment had become both my sanctuary and my prison. Every corner held memories of when we were a real family. On the living room shelf, between my Danielle Steele novels and the oil-stained cookbooks, I have a framed photo of Nicole on her graduation day. She wore that navy blue dress we chose together at the Macy's downtown, and her smile was so genuine it seemed to light up the whole photograph. Beside her, George hugged her with that paternal pride that makes fathers grow 2 inches taller. I was on the other side, my hair freshly done at the neighborhood salon, and my eyes shining with happiness. At what point did that young woman full of dreams turn into someone who saw me only as an ATM with feelings? The answer arrived on a Tuesday in November, as grey as all November Tuesdays in New York City. I had been preparing turkey and mashed potatoes, Nicole's favorite dish since she was little, thinking that maybe I could convince her to come for lunch with me that weekend. I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks, and the last time she came, she barely stayed 20 minutes. She sat on the edge of the couch, as if she were in a hurry to escape, constantly checking her cell phone while I told her about my hip physical therapy exercises. I dialed her number with these arthritic fingers that no longer obey like they used to. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "What is it now, Mum?" Her voice was a sigh of exasperation, as if my call were an annoying interruption to her important day. "Hello, honey," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "How are you? How is Jenny?" "Fine. Fine, everything's fine. What do you need? That question cut through me like a knife. What did I need? I needed to hear that she loved me. I needed her to ask how I was doing, if I was sleeping well, if my medications were agreeing with me. I needed her to invite me for a casual dinner, to ask my advice about something. Anything that would make me feel like I was still her mother, and not just a source of funding. Christmas is coming up, I said, my voice trembling. I thought maybe you could come for dinner on Christmas Eve. I've been practicing that prime rib recipe your father loved so much, and… Mum! She interrupted me with that tone she used when Jenny misbehaved. We've talked about this. We have our plans. Noah has family too, you know. Not everything revolves around you. Noah, her husband, the man who had won my daughter over with promises of a better life, smart investments in the tech market, and future plans that sounded so sophisticated I couldn't understand them. He worked in something related to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, or so he said. Always dressed in expensive suits and talking about million-dollar deals that were about to take off. It would just be one dinner, honey. We could… Please, Mum. Stop stressing me out. Her voice rose, taking on that harshness that chilled my blood. Don't you understand we're not kids anymore? We're living our life. You already lived yours. Why can't you get that? I was silent, literally speechless. The phone weighed on my ear as if it were made of lead. The pot roast was still simmering in the kitchen, filling the apartment with that aroma of rosemary and vegetables that had always meant home, family, love. But now it just smelled like uselessness. I just wanted to spend some time with you all, I murmured. I miss Jenny. I miss seeing you. I miss when we were… When we were what, Mum? When I didn't have my own life? When I depended on you for everything? That's over. Noah is right. You have to learn to live your life without focusing on ours. The click of the phone hanging up echoed in my ears like a door slamming shut. I stood there, receiver in hand, staring at the wall where the portrait of the Holy Family hung, which my mother had given me when I got married. Family is the most sacred thing there is, she had told me that day. Guard it as if it were the world's most precious treasure. How do you protect a treasure that no longer wants to be protected? How do you love someone who considers that love a burden? That night, as I stirred the pot roast that no one was going to eat, I realized I had been sending money every week for 5 years and had received exactly 2 visits that lasted more than an hour. 2 visits in 5 years. And on both occasions, the conversation had revolved around some urgent financial need that required my immediate help. The apartment felt smaller that night, as if the walls were closing in on me. In the silence, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door watching television. The muffled sound of laughter from some entertainment program. Normal life, normal people, normal families who ate dinner together and talked about how their day had gone. I opened the drawer where I kept the bank statements, sheet after sheet, transfer after transfer, $2,000 every Tuesday for 5 years. I had sent over $500,000. Money I could have used to travel, to fix the leak in the bathroom, to buy new clothes, to live with dignity instead of surviving on the bare minimum. But it wasn't the money that hurt. It was the unsettled debt of love that had fallen into the red. What I didn't know was that this phone conversation would only be the beginning of my descent into hell. The next day, I decided to try again. Maybe Nicole had a bad day at work. Maybe Noah had pressured her. Maybe she just needed time to reflect on what she had said. I dialed her number at 10 in the morning, when I knew Jenny would already be at school and she would have a moment of quiet. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. Hello, you've reached Nicole. Leave your message and I'll call you back when I can. Hello, honey, I said upon hearing the beep. It's Mum. I just wanted to apologize if I bothered you yesterday. It wasn't my intention to pressure you. Call me when you have a minute, okay? I love you. I waited all morning. Nothing. In the afternoon, I called again. This time the phone barely rang twice before voicemail kicked in. She had deliberately rejected it. The message I left this time was shorter, more desperate. Nicole, please call me. I just want to talk to you. On the third day, I tried calling at different times. Early in the morning, voicemail. At lunchtime, voicemail. At night, voicemail. It was as if she had vanished from the planet, taking my granddaughter and any trace of the family I thought we had with her. I decided to try a different tactic. I sent her a text message with those trembling hands that no longer handled the cell phone Nicole had given me last year very well. Only for emergencies, she had said then, as if talking to her were a luxury I had to ration. Hello, my girl. I've been thinking about what we talked about. You're right. Maybe I was too pushy. I just miss my granddaughter. Could you send me a photo of her? I haven't known how she is in weeks. The message was marked as delivered, then as read, but no reply ever came. The days turned into a sickening obsession. I counted the missed calls as if they were beads on a digital rosary. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20. Each unanswered call was a small death. One more confirmation that I had become a nuisance in my own daughter's life. Carla at the bank started noticing my state when I went in for the required weekly transfer. My hands trembled more than usual when signing the receipt, and I must have looked like I was attending a funeral because she asked if I was feeling well. Just a little tired, I lied, forcing a smile that must have looked more like a grimace of pain. Is your daughter still with those prosperous businesses? Carla asked, while processing the transfer. $2,000 weekly. She must be making very good investments. Investments. The word echoed strangely. I had never thought of the money transfers as investments, but as acts of maternal love. But investment implies a return, doesn't it? And I had been investing for 5 years without receiving anything but indifference in return. Yes, I replied automatically. She's doing very well. But as I walked back home along Fifth Avenue, dodging tourists and office workers who seemed to have important destinations, I realized I had no idea what my daughter actually did for work. I only knew that Noah talked a lot about numbers and computers, financial markets, and golden opportunities that were always about to take off. He had mentioned something about mining bitcoins from home, about creating a family fortune that would secure the future for everyone, including me. When this takes off, Eleanor, Noah had told me the last time I saw them, you're going to be so proud you invested in us from the beginning. Your money is going to multiply by 10. But where were those gains? Why did they keep needing my $2,000 a week if the businesses were doing so well? Why did Nicole never talk to me about Noah's successes, only about the new needs that arose every week? On the 20th day, without news from her, I decided to do something I never thought I would: go to their house unannounced. They lived in Beverly Hills, in a gated community of townhouses that cost more money than I had seen in my entire life. I took the subway to Union Station, and then a bus that took forever to reach its destination, winding through streets where the cars were worth more than my entire apartment. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Perfectly manicured lawn, brick facade, 2-car garage, a house that screamed financial success, prosperity, the life Noah had promised to give my daughter, a life I was unknowingly funding. I rang the doorbell with my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged bird. I heard footsteps approaching, the sound of locks being opened. The door cracked open and Nicole's face appeared, but not with the surprise I expected, but with something much worse: pure annoyance. "What are you doing here, Mum?" Not hello, not what a surprise, not a hug or even a smile. Just that question loaded with irritation, as if my presence at her doorstep were a territorial violation. "I wanted to see you," I said, feeling my voice sound small and pathetic. "You haven't answered my calls, and I told you I have my own plans for the holidays. Why can't you respect that?" Behind her, I could hear the television on, sounds of a children's program that suggested Jenny was home. My granddaughter was right there, less than 15 feet from me, and I couldn't see her. "Is Jenny there?" I asked, trying to peek over Nicole's shoulder. "I just want to say hello. It's been so long since—" "She's doing homework," she cut me off curtly. "She can't be bothered." Bothered. As if a visit from her grandmother were a bother to an 8-year-old who used to run to hug me every time she saw me. "Nicole, please. Just 5 minutes. You don't even have to invite me in. I just want to see her. Know she's okay." My daughter sighed with that exasperation she reserved for the most irritating situations in her life. For a moment I thought she would give in, that maternal instinct, or at least human decency, would make her reconsider. But instead, she took a step back and started to close the door. "Mum, you have to get over it. We're not kids anymore. We don't need you to focus on us all the time. It's overwhelming." Overwhelming? The word came out as a choked cry. "Sending you money every week is overwhelming. Worrying about you is overwhelming." "It's not the money, Mum. It's everything else. The constant need for attention, to be a part of our life, to—" "I am your mother," I exploded, surprising myself with the force of my voice. "I'm not asking for attention. I'm asking for love. I'm asking for a place in my granddaughter's life. I'm asking to be treated like family, not like a strange nuisance." Nicole looked at me with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. For one terrible second, I didn't recognize the girl I had raised, the teenager I had supported through her identity crises, the young woman who had cried in my arms when her first boyfriend left her for someone else. "Noah is right," she finally said. "You're pathetic, Mum. So pathetic." And she closed the door. I stood there, on the entrance step of the house my dollars had helped pay for, looking at the varnished wood that separated me from my family. Through the living room windows, I could see the lights of the Christmas tree they had set up. Golden ornaments shining with the warmth of a home that no longer included me. I walked to the bus stop as if I were in a trance. The ride back to New York City was a fog of contained tears and thoughts swirling like leaves in a whirlpool. When had I become someone who was pathetic? When had maternal love turned into an unbearable burden for my own daughter? That night, in the solitude of my apartment, I counted the missed calls once more. 38. 38 attempts to contact my daughter in 21 days. 38 small pleas for love that had fallen into the digital void of her indifference. The phone rang close to midnight, startling me from a light sleep full of nightmares where my granddaughter didn't remember my name. For a moment of irrational hope, I thought it might be Nicole, calling to apologize, to explain that she had had a bad day, that she hadn't meant to say those terrible things. But it was a number I didn't recognize. "Eleanor Miller?" a male voice asked that sounded unfamiliar. "Yes, that's me." "Who is speaking?" "I am Detective Smith, from the NYPD. I'm calling in relation to your son-in-law, Noah Peterson. We need to speak with you about some bank transfers." The world stopped. The words police and bank transfers echoed in my head like funeral bells. And suddenly, all the money I had been sending for 5 years took on a completely different meaning. "Police?" My voice came out as a broken whisper. "I don't understand. What happened to Noah?" "Mrs. Miller, I can't give you details over the phone, but we need you to come to the precinct tomorrow." We are investigating an online scam operation, and your name appears in several bank records as a potential victim. Victim. The word fell on me like a bucket of ice water. For 5 years, I had believed I was helping my family, investing in their future, making sure Jenny had everything she needed. And now a police officer was telling me I was a victim. Victim of what? I asked, though deep down I was starting to understand the terrible reality. Of fraud, Ma'am. Your son-in-law has been using the money you were sending to feed an illegal online gambling network. There are no investments. There are no prosperous businesses. It was all a lie. The phone slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a dry thud. I stood there, in the middle of my living room, looking at the walls that suddenly seemed to be closing in on me. Every dollar I had sent, every sacrifice I had made, every meal I had skipped to send more money, had all been to feed the vices of a man who didn't even consider me family. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. The detective was still on the line. Mrs. Miller, are you there? Yes. Yes, I'm here. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The Upper East Side precinct. Ask for me, Detective Smith, and bring all the bank statements you have of the transfers. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea that grew cold as I went through all the bank papers, again and again. Transfer after transfer, each with a date, an amount, a reason that now sounded ridiculous in light of the truth. To fix the car, for Jenny's school tuition, to invest in cryptocurrencies, to buy stocks in the stock market, for an emergency fund. All lies, all elaborate excuses to keep draining my savings while Noah compulsively gambled on illegal platforms. At 10 o'clock sharp, I was at the precinct, carrying a plastic bag full of bank documents that represented the evidence of my own stupidity. The detective turned out to be an older man, about 50 years old, with greying temples and an expression that mixed professionalism with genuine compassion. Please sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I know this must be very difficult for you. How much money? I asked directly without mincing words. How much money have I lost? The detective consulted a folder full of papers. According to our calculations, over the last 5 years you have transferred $520,000 to Noah Peterson's account, money he used to gamble on illegal online casinos, mainly in high-stakes poker games and sports betting. $520,000. Over $500,000. All the assets George had worked 30 years to accumulate, plus my widow's pension, plus the small savings I had been putting together for decades, all volatilized in the delusions of grandeur of a gambling addict. And my daughter? I asked, my voice barely audible. Did Nicole know anything? The detective looked at me with an expression that mixed pity and discomfort. Mrs. Miller, your daughter is being cited as an accomplice. The transfers went into their joint account, and there is evidence that she knew the actual destination of the money. Text messages between her and her husband coordinating the excuses they would give you to ask for more money. The world collapsed around me. Not only had I been defrauded by Noah, but betrayed by my own daughter. Nicole had been an active part of the deception. She had invented emergencies and needs, while knowing perfectly well that my money was evaporating at virtual poker tables. Messages, I whispered. The detective showed me printed copies of text conversations the police had recovered from Noah's phone. I read in horror how my daughter and her husband planned each request for money. Tell your mum we need it for the car insurance. I lost $3,000 last night in a bad run. I already asked her last week. She'll be suspicious. Invent something about Jenny's school. Mums always fall for that. Perfect. I'll tell her it's for extra English classes. Every message was a stab. Every conversation I read showed me how my daughter had converted my maternal love into a tool of manipulation. They spoke of me as if I were an idiot, someone who could be abused indefinitely because I was too foolish or too desperate to maintain family contact. How much have they lost in total? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Noah Peterson owes approximately $800,000 to different illegal gambling platforms. Your money, plus fraudulent bank loans, plus scams against other relatives and acquaintances, it's a considerable operation. $800,000. My head couldn't process those figures. It was enough money to buy several apartments, to travel the world, to live comfortably for years, and it had all been lost to the addiction of a man who had manipulated my daughter to turn me into his personal source of funding. What is going to happen now? I asked. Noah is already in custody. Nicole is cooperating with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The house in Beverly Hills will be foreclosed to pay part of the debts. And as for you, I'm afraid it is highly improbable that you will recover your money. I left the precinct as if I were walking on the seabed. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Sounds arrived muffled. Reality had become gelatinous and unreal. On the subway ride back home, I sat among workers and students who had normal problems, normal lives, normal families, who hadn't betrayed them to the point of utter ruin. Over the following days, New York City continued its usual pace, while my world completely disintegrated. News of the case appeared in the local papers. Scam network. Dismantled, affecting dozens of families in the New York area. Gambling addict scams, $500,000 from mother-in-law through elaborate deception. My personal tragedy had become a human interest story that people would read with their morning coffee before completely forgetting it. The phone rang one afternoon while I was trying to eat soup that tasted like cardboard. It was Nicole. For the first time in weeks, she was calling me. I answered with trembling hands, not knowing what to expect. "Mum!" Her voice sounded different, smaller, stripped of that arrogance that characterized our last conversations. "What do you want?" I asked, surprising myself with the coldness of my tone. "I need to explain. I need you to understand that I didn't want this to happen." "You didn't want to?" The laugh that came out was bitter as gall. "I have copies of your messages with Noah right here. Nicole, tell your mother that. Invent something about school. Mums always fall for that." Are those the words of someone who didn't want this to happen? The silence on the other end of the phone was so long I thought she had hung up. "At first it was just to get us out of a jam," she finally murmured. "Noah promised me he would pay it all back, that they were temporary investments. By the time I realized he had a gambling problem, it was too late. I was afraid to tell you. I was afraid of losing you." "Losing me?" My voice rose. "You were afraid of losing me while you were stealing from me? While you were inventing fake emergencies? While you were telling me I was pathetic when I came to see you?" "The thing at the house. That was awful, Mum. I was desperate. I knew everything was going to be found out, and you decided to humiliate me one last time before the charade was over." No, it wasn't that. I love you, Mum. I always have. But I was trapped in a situation that had gotten out of hand. The words, "I love you," sounded hollow, empty, like fake coins that jingle differently when they hit the floor. "Where is Jenny?" I asked. "With his parents in Los Angeles, until all this is sorted out. I want to see her." "Mum, now is not the time. Everything is very unsettled. She's confused. She doesn't understand why her father isn't home." "I want to see my granddaughter," I shouted, surprised by the strength that was still left in my voice. "She's the only thing I have left of this family of liars." The silence settled between us again, loaded with years of deception, misunderstood love, and trust destroyed beyond repair. "I'll call you in a few days," she finally said, "when things are calmer." She hung up before I could answer. I was left with the phone in my hand, looking at the screen that showed "call ended," as if those two words perfectly summarized what had happened to my family. Call ended, relationship ended, life ended. That night, as ambulance sirens wailed in the distance and New York City continued its nightlife, oblivious to my personal drama, I made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. I was not going to wait for any more calls from Nicole. I was not going to beg for crumbs of affection anymore. I was not going to be a victim once more of empty promises and emotional manipulation. It was time for Eleanor Miller to learn to live for herself, even if it meant starting over at 68 years old, without family, without money, but paradoxically, for the first time in decades, without lies. The following days unfolded in a strange haze of self-imposed silence. I disconnected the landline and put my cell phone on silent mode. For the first time in 5 years, my mornings did not begin with the anxiety of waiting for calls that never came, or transfers I had to make. This was a different silence from the one I had experienced during the weeks of Nicole's rejection. This was a chosen silence, controlled, mine. I sat in front of the bedroom mirror, the same one where I had styled my hair every morning for 40 years, and I did not recognize the woman who looked back at me. My hair was neglected, my skin grayish, like someone who had spent too many sleepless nights, and in my eyes there was something I took a while to identify. Absolute emptiness. Not sadness, not pain, not anger, just a void so deep it seemed to have absorbed all the life from my face. Carla from the bank knocked on my door 2 days later. I had seen her through the window climbing the stairs with that maternal concern developed by people who have worked all their lives dealing with clients who, without realizing it, become part of their daily lives. "Ms. Miller, you didn't come in on Tuesday to make your transfer," she said when I opened the door. "We at the bank were wondering if you were okay." I looked at her for a long moment, registering the irony that a bank employee showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own family. "There won't be any more transfers, Carla," I told her with a calm that surprised me. "It's over." Her face showed confusion, then comprehension, then something akin to compassion. She was an intelligent woman who had been seeing the money patterns of her clients for decades, and she had probably suspected that something was wrong with my weekly transfers for a long time. "Can I do anything for you?" she asked. "Yes," I replied after thinking for a moment. "Help me close all the accounts I share with my daughter and open a new one where only I have access." That same day, with Carla as the silent witness to my financial emancipation, I severed all the banking ties that connected me to Nicole. There was very little money left. Barely $3,000 from a pension I had been stretching for months to cover the transfers, but it was mine. For the first time in 5 years, every dollar in my account belonged exclusively to me. Over the following weeks, New York City continued its winter routine, while I learned to avoid my own silence. I would go for walks in Central Park when the timid January sun managed to break through the clouds, and I sat on benches where other people my age fed pigeons or read newspapers. I started observing those older women who seemed so serene, so complete in their solitude, and I wondered if any of them had gone through the same thing as me. One afternoon, while drinking coffee at a diner on Bleecker Street, I heard 2 women at the next table talking about their adult children. One of them was saying, "My son calls me every Sunday without fail. But sometimes I feel like it's more out of obligation than desire. As if he has an alarm on his phone reminding him, 'Call Mum.'" The other woman nodded knowingly. I preferred to step back before it came to that. I told my kids I no longer expected weekly calls, that when they wanted to talk to me, they knew where to find me. At first, they felt liberated, but then they started calling more, because it was no longer an obligation. Her words pierced me like needles. Had I turned my maternal love into such a heavy obligation that Nicole had to resort to stealing to free herself from it? Had my need to feel needed created the perfect ground for me to be manipulated? That night, I took out all the family photos I had scattered around the apartment. Photos of Nicole as a baby, Nicole as a child, Nicole as a teenager, Nicole on her wedding day. Photos of Jenny from newborn, up to the last one I had managed to see on social media before Nicole restricted all access. I spread them out on the dining room table, as if they were tarot cards that could reveal where everything had started to go wrong. In the oldest photos, Nicole looked at me with genuine love. In the most recent ones, her smile looked forced, her eyes avoided the camera, her body language suggested a rush to end the family moment. There had been signs I had chosen not to see, clues that my insistence on maintaining closeness had begun to suffocate instead of nurture. The phone rang close to midnight. It was a number I didn't recognize. But after so many days of silence, curiosity outweighed caution. "Grandma Eleanor?" The voice was small, childlike, laden with a sadness that cut through my chest like a knife. "Jenny?" I whispered, barely able to believe my granddaughter was on the other end of the line. "Yes, it's me. I'm at Dad's parents' house in Los Angeles. I found your number on Mum's old phone." "Honey, how are you? Are you okay?" The questions tumbled out of my throat. "Grandma, is it true that Dad stole your money?" The question left me breathless. How do you explain the complexity of what had happened to an 8-year-old? How do you protect her innocence without lying? "Dad did some bad things with the money, yes," I finally said. "But that's not your fault, or Mum's, or mine. Sometimes adults make very big mistakes. The grandparents here say you're mean, that you've always controlled Mum with money. But I remember when you came over and taught me to make peanut butter cookies, and you told me stories about when Mum was little. You didn't seem mean." Her words broke my heart and repaired it at the same time. In the midst of all the devastation, there was a little person who remembered the good times, who had perceived the genuine love underneath all the manipulation that had surrounded our family relationship. "I'm not mean, honey," I told her, my voice trembling. "But I'm not perfect either. Sometimes, when we love someone very much, we go wrong in the way we show it. Can I come see you someday? I miss your peanut butter cookies, and I want you to teach me more about when Mum was little." "I would love to see you, Jenny, but things are complicated right now. Mum and I have to fix some adult problems first." "Are you going to fix the problems? Are you going to forgive Mum?" The question hung in the air long after we hung up. Was I going to forgive Nicole? Could I do it? Should I do it? Over the next few nights, Jenny's voice accompanied me in my insomnia. She had called me Grandma, not with the formality that had characterized our last encounters, but with the affectionate naturalness from before. In her, there was no trace of the poison the adults had injected into our relationship. For Jenny, I was still the grandma who made cookies and told stories. A week later, Nicole showed up at my door unannounced. She looked terrible, haggard, with deep circles under her eyes, dressed in clothes she seemed to have been wearing for days. Behind her, almost hidden, was Jenny. "Mum," Nicole said in a hoarse voice, "can we come in? I need to talk to you." I looked at both of them from my doorstep. My daughter, who had stolen $500,000 from me and tried to turn me into a stranger. My granddaughter, who was still innocent in the midst of the disaster created by the adults. "Jenny can come in," I finally said. "You can stay on the landing." Nicole turned pale, but she didn't protest. Jenny ran into my arms with that childlike spontaneity I had missed so much. She clung to me as if I were a lifeline, and I hugged her, feeling something in my chest, something that had been frozen for months, slowly beginning to thaw. "Will you teach me to make peanut butter cookies?" she whispered in my ear. "Of course, honey," I replied, looking over her head at Nicole, who waited in the hallway with the patience of someone who knew she had lost the right to demand anything. While Jenny stirred the flour mixture in the kitchen, focused on not splashing, I realized I had a decision to make. I could continue to be a victim of what had been done to me, or I could choose what to salvage from the wreckage of my family. I could forgive without forgetting, love without being naive, include without allowing myself to be used. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely lost. I had a granddaughter who needed me in ways that had nothing to do with money, and I had a daughter who perhaps, with time and the right conditions, could learn to value what really mattered. But I was no longer going to be the same Eleanor who gave love away, expecting to buy it. If we were going to rebuild something, it would be from scratch, with new rules, with clear boundaries, and with the certainty that my worth as a person did not depend on how useful I was to others. It was a small beginning, but it was mine. The weeks that followed were a delicate experiment in the art of rebuilding a relationship from completely new foundations. Nicole came to pick up Jenny every Sunday, always punctual, always with that mixture of gratitude and humiliation in her eyes that constantly reminded me of the abyss that had opened between us. We exchanged the necessary minimal courtesies. "How are you?" "Fine, thank you." But the deep conversations remained suspended in an emotional territory neither of us knew how to navigate yet. Jenny, oblivious to the adult complexities, had turned Sundays into her favorite day. She arrived with a backpack full of homework that we did together at the kitchen table, while I prepared some traditional dish that I taught her step by step. She had an insatiable curiosity for the stories of when her mother was little, and I discovered that telling those memories helped me remember the Nicole I had raised, before the money and Noah's problems contaminated our relationship. "Did Mom get into trouble when she was little too?" Jenny asked me one afternoon while we peeled potatoes to make French fries. "Plenty," I told her, smiling at the memory. Once she skipped school because she wanted to come home to watch a movie that was on in the afternoon. She showed up at the door with her backpack and told me, "Mum, I didn't learn anything important today, but the Jungle Book is on TV." Jenny laughed with that crystalline laughter of children who have not yet learned to contain their joy. "And what did you do?" "Well, I sat down with her to watch the movie. And then I explained that skipping school wasn't okay, but that sometimes mothers also needed an afternoon movie with their daughters." In telling that story, I realized I had forgotten that version of myself, the mother who was capable of being flexible, of prioritizing moments of connection over rigid rules. When had I started turning my love into something so desperate and suffocating? During one of those Sunday afternoons, while Jenny was drawing in the living room, Nicole stayed in the kitchen with me instead of waiting for her in the car as she usually did. "Mum," she said, leaning against the door frame, "I want you to know that I'm going to therapy." I looked at her without answering immediately, weighing her words. "Psychological therapy or financial?" I asked with a frankness that surprised me. "Both," she replied, and for the first time in months, I detected something genuine in her voice. "I'm in a program for families of gambling addicts, and I'm also working with a therapist to understand how I got to the point of justifying what I did to you. And what have you discovered?" Nicole sat across from me at the table where we had shared thousands of meals when she was a child, a teenager, a young adult, the same table where I had signed all those bank slips that represented my financial ruin. That I turned your generosity into a trap for both of us. That instead of admitting that Noah had a problem and that I didn't know how to handle it, I preferred to perpetuate a lie that hurt you and destroyed me." Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced them in front of the mirror or with her therapist. But behind the rehearsal, there was something more, something that sounded like real understanding. "And now what?" I asked her. "Do you expect me to say everything is forgiven, and we'll go back to how we were before?" "No," she replied quickly. "Before was bad, Mum. I depended on you in ways that weren't healthy, and you gave in ways that weren't healthy either. If we're going to fix this, it has to be different." The word fix hung between us. Was it possible to fix a relationship that had been based on such toxic patterns? Or would we have to build something completely new? "What do you propose?" I asked her. "That we start from scratch? That I prove, for as long as it takes, that I can be a daughter who respects you without needing your money? And that you see if you can forgive me someday, not because you have to, but because you want to?" Over the following months, we developed a strange but functional routine. Nicole had found a job as a sales clerk in a clothing store at the Westwood Mall, a job that paid her much less than she was used to, but that gave her the economic independence she had never had. She lived in a small rented apartment in Santa Monica. She had sold her car and used public transportation. She had learned to budget and live within her real means. Every Sunday when she came to pick up Jenny, she would show me her accounts. At first I thought it was a childish display, a way to show that she had learned her lesson. But later, I understood that it was something deeper. It was her way of being accountable to me, of demonstrating that there were no more financial secrets between us. "I saved $120 this month," she told me one Sunday in March, showing me a notebook where she wrote down every expense. "It's not much, but it's mine. I don't owe it to anyone. It doesn't come from deceiving anyone." I looked at her there, with her hands stained with hair dye, because she had started colouring her own hair to save money, dressed in clothes she had clearly bought on sale, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw my daughter working to achieve things, instead of just asking for them. Noah had been released from jail with a restraining order and a prohibition from approaching Nicole and Jenny. He had started a rehabilitation program for gambling addicts, but Nicole had been clear. She didn't want anything to do with him until he proved, over years, not months, that his recovery was real. For the first time since they had met, my daughter was making decisions without consulting a man who manipulated her. "Do you miss him?" I asked one afternoon, while we watched Jenny play in Central Park. "I miss the feeling of being accompanied," she answered honestly. "But I don't miss living in constant fear that he would discover his lies, or having to invent excuses to ask you for money, or feeling like I had no control over my own life." During those months, I was also changing. I had started doing things I hadn't done in decades. I signed up for water aerobics classes at the Municipal Recreation Centre, where I met Martha, a 73-year-old woman who had raised 4 children alone and had that quiet wisdom of someone who has survived many storms. "Do you know the difference between helping and rescuing?" Martha asked me one afternoon while we had coffee after class. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Helping is doing something for someone that they cannot do for themselves. Rescuing is doing something for someone that they should be doing for themselves. You spent years rescuing your daughter from the consequences of her decisions. Now you are helping her learn to live with those consequences." Her words stayed with me for days. I realized that my relationship with Nicole had improved precisely because I had stopped rescuing her. By forcing her to face her reality, without my dollars as a safety net, I had forced her to develop internal resources she didn't know she had. I also started using my time in ways that surprised me. I returned to reading, something I had abandoned during the obsessive years of worrying about my family. I became a member of the Upper East Side Library and discovered new authors. stories that transported me far from my own problems. I started cooking for myself with the same care I had put into cooking for others for years, experimenting with recipes I found online. One Sunday in April, while Jenny was helping prepare chili in my kitchen, Nicole told me something I didn't expect. "Mom, I want to pay you back the money." I looked at her with surprise. "Nicole, you know that's impossible. It's over $500,000. "Not all at once," she said, stirring the mix with the concentration of someone who was learning to cook for the first time. "But something every month, even if it's $50, $100. I know I can never pay you back everything, but I want to try. Not because you have to forgive me if I do it, but because it's the right thing to do." "And what if you can't? What if life gets complicated and you can't keep paying?" "Then that will be my problem, not yours. No more excuses, no more fake emergencies. If I can't pay you, I'll tell you the truth, plain and simple." That night, after they left, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and thought about the path we had traveled. It wasn't the reconciliation I had imagined in my fantasies during the months of abandonment. It wasn't the perfect family from the movies where everyone hugs and cries and promises to love each other forever. It was something more real, more fragile, more honest. It was a relationship built on the foundation of actions, not words. A relationship where love had to be demonstrated day by day, not taken for granted. And for the first time in years, that seemed sufficient to me. Summer arrived in New York City with that suffocating intensity that turns the city into an oven. But for the first time in years, I had plans that didn't revolve around waiting for phone calls or worrying about bank transfers. Martha had convinced me to sign up for a trip organized by the Senior Center, a week in Miami Beach, at a modest but clean hotel, where we could sunbathe, walk on the beach, and meet new people. "When was the last time you did something just for you?" Martha had asked me while we changed after water aerobics. The question left me thoughtful for days. I couldn't remember doing anything solely for my own enjoyment in decades. Every decision, every expense, every plan had been filtered through the question, is this okay if I have to send money to Nicole? Even my small pleasures, a coffee on a patio, a new book, a magazine, came with guilt for spending money that should be reserved for my family. When I told Nicole about the trip, I expected resistance, questions about the cost, perhaps some comment on whether it was prudent to spend money on indulgences at my age, but her reaction surprised me. "That sounds perfect, Mom. You deserve a real vacation." "Do you think so?" I asked, still struggling with the feeling that doing something for myself was a betrayal of my family responsibilities. "I think you've spent 50 years taking care of everyone but yourself. It's about time you changed that." The day we left for Miami Beach, I felt like a teenager playing hooky. On the bus, surrounded by other women and men my age who chatted animatedly about their grandchildren, their aches and pains, and their plans for the coming days, I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to be part of a group where I wasn't the one paying the bills or solving problems. I was simply Eleanor, a 68-year-old woman going on vacation like any normal person. The first night at the hotel, dining on a terrace overlooking the ocean, while a gentle breeze relieved the heat of the day, Martha made an observation that stuck with me. "You look different when you're not in New York. Like you're more, how to put it, more present." Present? In New York, you always have that expression of waiting for something. A call, bad news, an emergency. Here, you're simply here. She was right. For years, I had lived in a state of constant alert, always preparing for Nicole's next crisis, the next request for money, the next emotional disappointment. I had forgotten what it felt like to be in a moment without anticipating the next problem. During that week, I learned things about myself that had been buried under decades of worrying about others. I discovered that I liked getting up early to walk on the beach before the tourists arrived, when the sea was calm and the sand was cool under my feet. I realized I had an easy time making friends, something I had forgotten during the years of social isolation I had lived, while obsessing over my family's problems. I met Sarah, a widow from Texas, who had raised 3 children alone after her husband died in a workplace accident. Unlike me, she had established clear boundaries with her children from the beginning. When Bill died, she told me one afternoon while we drank iced tea at a beach bar, my kids were 18, 20, and 23. I knew that if I didn't force them to be independent immediately, they would turn into eternal children who would always need mum to solve their problems. And did it work? At first they hated me, she laughed, especially the youngest, who was the most spoiled. But now I have 3 kids who wake up every morning knowing they are capable of solving their own problems. And when they call me, it's because they want to talk to me, not because they need something from me. Her words resonated with me throughout the week. I had raised Nicole believing that love was demonstrated by solving problems, but perhaps true love was demonstrated by teaching her to solve them alone. When I returned to New York City, tanned and more relaxed than I had felt in years, I found a surprise waiting for me. Nicole had been taking care of my plants during my absence, and she had left a note on the kitchen table next to an envelope. "Mum, I hope you enjoyed your vacation. Here is the first payment of what I owe you. It's not much, but it's the beginning. I love you, Nicole." Inside the envelope were $150 and a receipt showing she had cancelled her Netflix and Spotify subscriptions to save money. They were small gestures, but symbolically enormous. For the first time, my daughter was giving things up to pay money back instead of asking for more. That same week, I made a decision I had been putting off for months. I had been thinking about moving to a smaller apartment, something more manageable and economical that would allow me to live comfortably on my pension without having to worry about excessive expenses. But I had always found excuses. What if Nicole needed me? What if Jenny wanted to sleep over and I didn't have enough space? But after a week living in a hotel room and discovering that I didn't miss all the objects filling my current apartment, I understood that I was clinging to a space too big for my current life, out of fear of change, not real necessity. I found a perfect apartment in Greenwich Village, in a renovated building with an elevator and lots of natural light. It was half the size of my current apartment, but it had a small balcony overlooking the pedestrian street, full of coffee shops and bookstores. It was the kind of neighborhood where I could walk everywhere, where there was life at all hours, where I wouldn't feel isolated. When I told Nicole about it, her reaction confirmed that I was making the right decision. "That's great, Mum. You're going to love that neighborhood. There are lots of activities, lots of interesting people, and it's much better connected than the Upper East Side. You don't mind that I'm selling the apartment where you grew up? Would you mind if I sold my house to move somewhere that made me happier?" Her question made me think. Of course I wouldn't mind. I would want her to live wherever she was happiest, not where she preserved memories that maybe no longer served her. The moving process was liberating in ways I didn't expect. Every item I decided to donate or throw away was a weight off my shoulders. I kept the essentials. The books I really wanted to reread. The clothes I really liked. The kitchen utensils I actually used. Everything else. Furniture I had bought decades ago. Decorations that no longer reflected my current tastes. Appliances I used once a year. Found new homes or was donated to charities. Jenny helped me pack the books, classifying them by themes with the seriousness of someone performing an important mission. "Grandma, why do you have so many cookbooks if you already know how to cook?" "Because there are always new things to learn," I explained. "And because reading about food makes me happy, even if I don't cook all the recipes." Can I also have books that make me happy, even if I don't use them for anything practical? Of course. The best books are the ones we read because we like them, not because we have to. Over the next few weeks, as I turned the new apartment into my home, I realized I was creating a space that reflected who I was now, not who I had been or who others expected me to be. I chose colors I liked instead of ones that looked right. I bought a small round table for 2 people instead of the big dining table, where I had tried to gather a family that rarely came. I installed a comfortable armchair by the window where I could read with good natural light. The first Sunday Jenny came to the new apartment, she was fascinated by the balcony. "It's like an adult dollhouse," she declared. "Everything is just the right size." And she was right. For the first time in decades, I was living in a space that was just the right size for my real life, not for the life I had imagined I should have. One night in September, while having dinner in my new kitchen with a perfect view of the street where people walked after work, I received a text message from Nicole. "Mum, I've been thinking about writing you a letter with everything I've never told you. Is that okay? Not so you forgive me immediately, but so you truly understand how we got here." I replied that yes, I was ready to hear anything she had to say. But as I wrote the response, I realized something important. I was no longer desperate for explanations or apologies. My well-being no longer depended on what Nicole did or didn't do. I had found a way to be happy that didn't require the approval or constant presence of my family. And paradoxically, that emotional independence had made our relationship more genuine, not less. It was a lesson that had taken me 68 years to learn, but it was worth every moment of pain it had cost. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my door as if Nicole had wanted to leave it without risking an immediate conversation. It was a thick envelope, on good paper, with my name written in the careful handwriting I remembered from her school years. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat in my new armchair by the balcony, where the October light entered soft and golden. And I opened the letter that I knew could forever change the way I understood our relationship. "Mum," it began, "I don't know if this letter will make me a better person or simply confirm how selfish I've been, but I need to write it because, for the first time in my adult life, I'm learning to be honest." The first pages recounted things I already knew: how she had met Noah, how he had started gambling small amounts that he won in online poker, how those initial victories had convinced him that he had an infallible system for generating easy money. But then came the revelations that churned my stomach. "The first time I asked you for money to fix the car was perfectly fine. Noah had lost $3,000 in one night, and we needed to pay some loan sharks who had started calling with threats. I knew it was a lie. I knew he was using your love for me to get money out of you. But I told myself it was temporary. Just this once, I thought. We'll pay it back in a month when Noah gets lucky again." But of course, there was never luck. Just increasingly greater losses that required increasingly more elaborate lies. Nicole described in chilling detail how they had perfected the art of manipulating me, how Noah studied my emotional patterns when I was most likely to say yes, what kind of emergencies caused me the most anxiety, how to use Jenny as an emotional leverage without it seeming like direct blackmail. "We started calling you the Family Federal Reserve," she wrote, "as if you were a bank that would always have funds available for our crises. Noah told me that all families worked that way, that successful parents helped their children build wealth, that when he started winning seriously, we would turn you into a millionaire. And I wanted to believe it, Mum. I wanted to believe that I wasn't stealing from you, but that I was giving you the opportunity to invest in our future." The most painful part came when she described the conversations they had after each successful transfer. "We laughed, Mum. We laughed about how easy it had been to convince you once more. Noah would imitate your voice, worrying about whether we had enough money for groceries. And I would imitate your sigh when I explained why we needed help again. We turned your love into a private joke between us. And the worst part is, I didn't feel guilty. I felt smart, like I had discovered a trick that other children didn't know. I had to put the letter down for several minutes to process what I was reading. It wasn't just that they had stolen money from me. It was that they had turned my maternal pain into entertainment. They had taken my sleepless nights, worrying about their well-being, and transformed them into funny anecdotes to tell while spending my savings on online gambling. When I resumed reading, Nicole described the moment everything started to change for her. It was when Jenny turned 8, and you couldn't come to her party because you had the flu. She spent the whole day asking about you, saying the party wasn't the same without Grandma Eleanor. And I realized that my daughter loved you more genuinely than I had loved you in years. She didn't see you as a source of expensive gifts or easy money. She saw you as a person who loved her unconditionally. And I was ashamed, Mum. For the first time in 5 years, I was ashamed of what I was doing to you. But the shame hadn't been enough to stop them. They kept asking for money. They kept inventing crises. They kept feeding Noah's addiction with my hard-earned dollars until the police investigation exposed them and their whole house of cards collapsed. When the detective showed me the total sum of what we had stolen from you, I couldn't believe it. $520,000. It was more money than I had seen together in my whole life. And suddenly I understood why you lived with such austerity, why you never bought new clothes, why you refused invitations to go out to dinner. It wasn't because you were stingy. It was because you were giving us your whole life, dollar by dollar. The letter continued with something I didn't expect, a brutal dissection of our relationship from her adult perspective. But I also have to tell you something harder, Mum. You taught me that love was bought. Not intentionally, not consciously, but you taught me. Every time I had a problem and you showed up with money to fix it. Every time you made me feel that your value as a mother depended on how useful you were to me. Every time you turned your anxiety about being a good mother into my emotional responsibility, you were teaching me that relationships worked through transactions, not mutual respect. Those words hit me like a slap, because there was truth in them, a truth I had been avoiding for months. I had contributed to creating the toxic dynamic that had destroyed us. My desperate need to feel needed had created the perfect ground for me to be manipulated. I am not writing this to justify what I did, the letter continued. I am writing this because if we are going to build something new, it has to be based on the complete truth, not just the part that makes me look bad and you look good. We both participated in this, Mum. You from the fear of abandonment, me from the comfort of never having to grow up. The final pages described the process she had gone through in learning to separate love from money, help from dependence, filial responsibility from emotional blackmail. My therapist asked me what kind of relationship I wanted to have with you in the future, and I realized I had never asked myself that question. I had always assumed that our relationship was what it was, without questioning it or trying to improve it. Now I want a relationship where we respect each other as independent adults, where I can ask your advice without feeling like I owe you something in return, where you can be proud of me for who I am, not for what I do for you. The letter ended with a specific proposal. I want us to spend a whole day together doing something we've never done, not cooking for Jenny, not talking about family problems, not reviewing accounts or discussing the past. Just two adult women getting to know each other as people, not as mother and daughter with all the baggage that entails. If after that day you decide you don't want to continue our relationship, I will understand. But if you decide it's worth a try, we'll start from there, from who we are now, not from who we were. I folded the letter carefully and left it on the table. Outside, the life of Greenwich Village continued at its normal pace. Students walking to the university, young mothers pushing strollers, seniors drinking coffee on the patios, normal people living normal lives, without family dramas keeping them awake at night. Over the next few hours, I reread the letter 3 times. Each reading revealed something new, a truth I had preferred to ignore, a responsibility I had avoided assuming, an opportunity I hadn't known existed. That night, I called Martha and read her the most important paragraphs of the letter. "What do you think?" I asked when I finished. "I think your daughter has grown more in these months than in the 5 years before," she answered without hesitation. "And I think you have the opportunity to have the relationship you always wanted, but never knew how to build. What if it's another manipulation? What if this is just another way to soften me up to get something? What could she possibly get now? You don't have money to steal anymore. You no longer depend on her emotionally. You've already proven that you can be happy without her. If she wants to build a relationship with you now, it can only be because she genuinely desires it." She was right. For the first time in our mother-daughter relationship, we were on equal footing. Neither had something the other desperately needed. If we were going to rebuild our relationship, it would be because we both freely chose it, not out of obligation or manipulation. The next day, I sent Nicole a text message. "I accept your proposal. Organize the day whenever you like, but with one condition. It has to be something neither of us has ever done before. I want to discover who you are when you are not being my daughter, and I want you to discover who I am when I am not being your mother." Her reply came 2 hours later. "Perfect. You're going to love what I've come up with." And for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to spend time with my daughter, not out of obligation or nostalgia, but out of pure curiosity to meet the woman she had become when no one was looking. The day Nicole had organized for us turned out to be a surprise I never would have imagined. She picked me up early on a Saturday in November, when New York City was cool but sunny, and took me on the subway to a part of the city I didn't know, the Lower East Side neighborhood. During the trip, we didn't talk about family matters. Instead, she told me about the pottery class she had signed up for to manage the stress of her new life. "Pottery?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "You never mentioned you were interested in art." "I didn't know I was interested either," she admitted. "But it turns out that when you can't solve everything with money, you discover you need other outlets for anxiety. And getting your hands in the clay is strangely relaxing." We headed to a pottery studio run by a couple of Peruvian artists who had converted a small space into a light-filled studio. Shelves loaded with pieces in different stages of completion, and the earthy aroma of fresh clay. Nicole had booked a private class for 2 people. We were going to learn to make bowls from scratch. "I chose this because it's something neither of us has ever done," she explained as they put work aprons on us. "And because it requires total concentration. You can't be thinking about other things when your hands are on the wheel." She was right. The first 30 minutes were a revelation of how incompetent I could be at something completely new. My hands, accustomed to precise household tasks, didn't know how to press the clay without completely deforming it. My first attempt at a bowl looked more like a crashed flying saucer. Nicole wasn't doing much better, but she laughed at her mistakes with a lightness I hadn't seen in years. "This is so much harder than it looks," I said, as my second attempt collapsed into a formless pile of mud. "Like most things worth doing," Nicole replied, focused on centering her piece on the wheel. During those 3 hours, I discovered facets of my daughter I was completely unaware of. She was patient with long processes, had a good eye for proportions, and possessed a practical creativity she had never had the chance to develop. When I finally managed to make a small but functional bowl, I felt ridiculously proud, as if I had conquered Mount Everest. "Do you know what I like most about this?" Nicole asked me as we waited for our pieces to dry enough to decorate them. "That there's no way to cheat. You either learn the technique or it doesn't turn out well. You can't buy the result you want. You can't manipulate anyone into doing it for you. It's honestly yours or it's nothing." Her words resonated in the studio like a declaration of principles. We were learning more than pottery. We were learning new ways of relating that didn't depend on inherited family roles or power dynamics established decades ago. While we decorated our bowls with coloured glazes that we wouldn't know how they would look until after the final firing, we started talking about things we had never discussed. Nicole told me about her plans to study for an advanced degree in business and finance, something she had wanted to do for years, but had never considered possible, while she depended on quick fixes for economic problems. "I want to truly understand how money works," she told me, "not to get rich quickly, but so I never again feel panic every time an unexpected expense arises." I told her about my water aerobics classes, about the reading group I had found at the Greenwich Village Library, about the strange but liberating feeling of making plans without consulting anyone else. "Do you feel lonely, Pio?" she asked. "Sometimes," I replied honestly, "but it's different from how I felt when I was surrounded by people who didn't truly value me. This loneliness feels chosen, like it's a space I'm creating to discover who I am when I'm not taking care of others." While the Peruvian artists put our pieces in the kiln for the first firing, Nicole and I walked through the Lower East Side, with no specific destination. The neighborhood had a cosmopolitan energy that I found stimulating: Ethiopian restaurants next to traditional New York bars, sari shops next to bookstores specializing in philosophy. It was like walking through a New York I didn't know, multicultural and vibrant, full of possibilities I had never explored. "Do you know what surprises me most about you now?" Nicole said, while we drank coffee on a patio, surrounded by conversations in languages I didn't recognize. "That you seem younger, not physically, but more curious, more open to new things." "It's because I'm no longer constantly afraid," I explained. "For years I lived in terror that you would abandon me, that you would stop needing me. Now that the worst thing I could imagine has happened, and I've survived, I no longer have anything to desperately protect." "And you don't miss me? Don't you miss how we were before?" The question made me think. Did I miss our previous relationship? Did I miss feeling indispensable, even if it was through manipulative ways? "I miss the illusion that we were a close family," I finally said. "But I don't miss the constant anxiety, the feeling of walking in an emotional minefield, the way I turned my love into a commercial transaction." We returned to the studio at the end of the day to pick up our bowls. The firing had transformed the damp pieces into real ceramic, and the glazes had taken on tones neither of us had anticipated. My bowl had come out in a deep blue with golden streaks that appeared when the light hit it a certain way. Nicole's was jade green with coppery spots that looked like autumn leaves. "They are perfect precisely because they are not what you expected," the Peruvian ceramic artist said as she wrapped our pieces in bubble wrap. "The fire always adds its own surprise to the process." Back in Greenwich Village, as Nicole walked me to my apartment entrance, carrying my new bowl as if it were a treasure, I realized we had spent a whole day together, without a single argument, without resentment, without references to the traumatic past. We had simply been two women learning something new, laughing at our mistakes, discovering facets of ourselves we didn't know. "Shall we do it again in a month?" Nicole asked before saying goodbye. "We can look for another activity neither of us has done." "I would love that," I replied, and I genuinely meant it. 6 months later, sitting on my Greenwich Village balcony, with a cup of tea served in the bowl I had made with my own hands, I can clearly see the path we have travelled. Nicole comes to visit me every 2 weeks, always bringing the $150 that she religiously deposits into a savings account we agreed will be for Jenny when she turns 18. Not because I asked her to, but because she says it's important for her to maintain that discipline. Jenny still comes on Sundays, but now our time together is different. I no longer feel the desperate pressure to make the most of every minute as if it were the last. Instead, we let the afternoons flow naturally. Sometimes we cook, sometimes we read, sometimes we just walk around the neighborhood looking at shop windows. She tells me things about school without me having to interrogate her, and I tell her things about my week without feeling like I have to justify every activity I do without her. Noah is complying with his rehabilitation program, but he is still not part of our lives. Nicole has made it clear that that door will not reopen until he proves, over years, not months, that his recovery is solid. For the first time since I've known her, my daughter is making decisions based on her own values, not on external pressure or fear of abandonment. I have developed a life that surprises me with its fullness. In addition to water aerobics and the reading group, I have signed up to volunteer by teaching English to foreigners. It turns out that I have the patience to teach, and that I enjoy helping people who are building new lives in a different country. It is a form of helping that feels genuine, not compulsive. The lesson I have learned after all this devastation is paradoxical. I loved my family better when I stopped desperately needing them, when my happiness stopped depending on their approval, when my self-esteem stopped being based on how useful I was to them, when my emotional well-being stopped being hostage to their decisions. Only then could we begin to build relationships based on mutual respect instead of fear of abandonment. Not all stories of family betrayal end with reconciliation. Many end with definitive separations, and that can also be the healthiest decision. But in our case, the complete devastation of what we had allowed us to build something completely new. Have you ever lived with that feeling of loving someone so much that you end up suffocating them? Do you know someone who has confused generosity with emotional manipulation? Tell me in the comments if you have gone through something similar. If this story has touched your heart, hit like and subscribe to the channel so this message reaches someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what is truly worth keeping.